Good afternoon, everyone. Please excuse the delay. We had another webinar going on, so I'm sorry about that. I'm sure Mike and GP will be joining shortly, so give us a couple of seconds and we'll get started. Thank you.
Busy lady.
Hey, Mike. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Oh, there's GP.
Hi, GP.
We've already got 22, it looks like, and the numbers are still growing.
This is handsome self.
You can tell the difference?
Yeah, you look great.
Why, thank you. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Lauren. I figure she always has nice hair. She always looks nice, so I should bring her.
Yeah, and always smiling too, right?
Indeed.
You guys are too kind.
It's good to see you too.
How do you feel, GB?
Much better. I still have a little bit of an itch remaining. It will go away, but for the most part, I feel good.
Good. Same here. We are both hurting, but we're back.
Yes. So today I have to leave around 12:40 or 1:40. So I have a couple of updates for 2022 tax season.
Right.
Beautiful.
We'll go with that.
All right, go for it.
Perfect.
Well, let me dive into the intro and we can get started.
Yes.
I'm gonna go ahead and open up my go. Yeah, it looks like our numbers have steadied now.
Good.
Let's see. Can you gentlemen see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. All right, let's get started.
Cool.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lauren Simpson. I'm with the SBDC, or the Small Business Development Center. We are a national program with over 1,000 locations across the country, and we offer no-cost services to local small businesses. Now, our services are at no cost to you because your tax dollars have already taken care of all of our fees. For the Los Angeles network, we serve the Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, and Ventura counties. And our center locations are on the map in front of you. You can see we're as far out as Camarillo, Santa Clarita, Pasadena, over to Laverne, throughout Los Angeles, all the way down to Long Beach. Excuse me. Now, you'll want to get in contact with one of our centers, because we offer no-cost business advising, and then we also offer no-cost virtual trainings. Now, if I go back to that business advising, that is your opportunity to meet one-on-one via Zoom with one of our business experts. And so we have experts in the fields of marketing, advertising, taxes, finance. If you're a handyman looking to go into construction, we can help you with those sorts of transitions. Honestly, you name it, we've got someone to cover that topic. And the same goes for our virtual trainings. We have tons of topics, tons of information to share with you. All you have to do is take that next step and get in contact with us. Speaking of contact, please give us a call, area code 866-588-7232, or you can go online, smallbizla.org/new client. Now, if you've reached out to us, or if you've joined us today, and you are located outside of the Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, or Ventura counties, please go to americaspdc.org/find your SBDC. I'm going to stop. Excuse me, my screen share. Oh, I should do housekeeping. Any questions, throw those into the Q&A, and then the chat, we will be sharing any sort of useful links for you. And I think that's it.
Well, let's keep the questions on task. GB has a limited amount of time today.
Yes, so I'll be here till 45, and today, because I'm doing this presentation after a long time, the goal is to give you a quick overview on the 2022 taxes that are due in the next couple of weeks and months, and then to open up any Q&A through Mike and through Lauren, staying on topic. So the topic for today is a variety of tax topics for 2022 tax season. So let's get started. Number one, for some of you, maybe many of you, IRS is recommending don't file your taxes just yet. You may be ready, your tax preparer may be ready, you may have all your documents, but there were some tax credits, some tax incentives that were given out by California, by Colorado, by about 13 other states in our union, and IRS hasn't made a determination on how that income, that credit will be taxed. So for example, some of you may have received a middle class tax refund last year. As of right now, California has given this ruling that that income, that credit given to a lot of taxpayers based on their 2022 tax return is non-taxable. But IRS hasn't codified in its system how to determine that. Chances are most likely it will be taxable, but because there's a lack of determination, IRS is suggesting hold off. Now, they are also reminding this does not mean you will have extra time to do your taxes. The April 15th deadline still applies. If IRS hasn't made its mind by that time, you are then expected to pay your estimated tax liability, because the extension is always extension to file, never to pay. So pay your estimated tax liability for last year, but file for an extension. So some of you who may be running LLC tax as an S Corp, or maybe running a corporation tax as an S Corp, you may recall last year we had a similar issue where there was a new requirement for K2, K3, and IRS didn't make its determination until mid-June on that. So it is nothing new. Because of the pandemic, these are lingering issues that are still to be contended with. There is no extension to file automatically. If IRS doesn't make up its mind, it is recommending file an extension, but it is also suggesting not to file your tax return right now. Some of my clients have suggested that, GB, if you think chances are this will be taxable income anyways, why not just report it for IRS purposes and file the tax return, and they just want to put the issue to bed. It is a possibility, but there are conversations at the US Treasury that they may make, depending upon the income, for some taxpayers to have only partial or maybe none of these incentives to be taxable. If that happens, then you will be on hook to file an amendment to get your money back. So yes, there are other options that are available, but the guidance from the IRS is not to create more paperwork for them, not to create more work for them, just to hold on tight, and they will get the issues determined sooner rather than later. Any questions on that topic that may have come in, Mike?
No, Lauren, someone's asking for the link to the webinar replays. If you could post that in that room, that would be good.
Perfect. So if no questions on that, then some of the other issues to be mindful of. Previously, up until tax year 2021, the idea was if you are accepting credit cards or other electronic forms of payment, you were expecting to have a 1099-K issued to you if you had $20,000 in transactions and 200 transactions. If either one was not met, you were not issued a 1099-K. Starting this tax season for tax year 2022, make sure you log in and check if there are any 1099-Ks issued to you by Venmo, by PayPal, by maybe, no, actually not Zelle, because Zelle is peer-to-peer, but Venmo, PayPal, your merchant provider, anybody else that you, any of the platforms, Stripe, Square, that you may use to accept credit card payments. Because depending upon what options you may have chosen, you may be receiving any and all documents from your provider via electronic delivery, so they may not mail you a 1099-K. Now, if you report sales that are different from what is reported to you on 1099-K, there could be an issue, because each one of these platforms issues a 1099-K differently. Some issue net, some take their fees out, some do not. And also, there are issues where sometimes if your sales that you're reporting on your tax return, maybe you did some returns. Sometimes you may accept a credit card payment, but you did a refund and you paid cash back. So you reduce your sales, but your 1099-K is still reporting higher sales. That's a very common discrepancy that I see with some of my clients. And that may issue a CP 2000 letter from the IRS saying, hey, What the merchant told us and what you told us is a mismatch. Causes more issues, causes more headache. So make sure you check with each and every provider to check for any 1099Ks because they may not be mailed to you. And I've already had some clients where the provider said that 1099K is mailed. It's already February 9th and they haven't received it yet, even though it was mailed supposedly on January 15th. The deadline for those to be issued to you and provided to you was January 31st. So we are already 9 days into February, but because of some USPS issues, it is always a good idea to go check online. Now, this is true for all your other 1099s as well. 1099s INT, 1099s DIV for dividends, 1099s for the broker. Sometimes things mess up. Also, this was a common issue last year. A lot of brokerages such as Robinhood, Charles Schwab, TD Ameritrade, they issued a corrected 1099s after the fact because there's always a mad rush by January 31st. Sometimes things don't always play out. So if you are expecting any substantial tax forms, it is also recommended to get on an extension. Wait for any 1099s corrected that may be coming your way, because if dividends were not reported to you properly and you report the lower amount, you will have to file an amendment down the line. So 1099Ks and every other 1099, check the online system to get the most current one. Any questions that may have come in on that, Mike?
No, but remind us, what is the form to file an extension for a corporation, partnership, etc.?
Good. So most S corps, whether you're an LLC or a corporation, taxed as an S corp, and partnerships are due by March 15th. Now, if the March 15th is the weekend, then of course it's the next business day. The individuals and the C corps are due April 15th, and nonprofits are due by May 15th. So if you're running a nonprofit, you want to be mindful of that. If you apply for an extension, then you get a 6-month extension to file, but always remember it's an extension to file, not an extension to pay.
And what is the form or forms?
So there are different forms depending upon if you're filing for the personal or individual. It's I don't think if you're using TurboTax or if your tax preparer using it, you can have the form issued and sent out. Now, there are also some issues where you may have applied for an S corp election, you got the EIN, and when you do the tax return filing, the e-file system your S corp election may not have been filed yet. If that's an issue, you may want to file by paper as well and save the postmark so that you can take care of that if you are going to go on extension.
Okay. Somebody has a question about the 1099K.
Okay.
What is the dollar limit for the 1099? Did they
Now
go back to the old limit?
No. So the old limit was $20,000 in transactions and 200 transactions. So for example, you could have had $1 million in transaction, but only 199 transactions. No 1099K was issued. So both had to be met. But now going forward, effective tax year 2022, $600. So if you accepted credit card payments or other electronic forms of payment totaling $600 or more per merchant, you are to expect a 1099K.
Somebody's asking, what's the name of the online system to check 1099s issued to an individual? I don't know that there is one.
There was a new fire system that the IRS started this year, so you can file 1099s electronically for the people that you have made payments to. They had issues, but I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to.
I'm not sure about that.
But usually if you're expecting a 1099K, it should be coming to you from your merchant provider. So some people in retail use Clover, some people use Acuity, variety, and then they have their own names. So check with your merchant, yeah.
So Leslie wants to know if she needs to change her business name. Does she notify the IRS with regards to the change of her business name?
Yes.
And does she need a new EIN? That's another question.
No. So it's the same as if somebody were to get married and a spouse may take the other spouse's name, or they may hyphenate their names. Sometimes people go through a different identity. The EIN doesn't change. The EIN only changes if there's a substantial change in ownership or the way the tax return is filed. So there are some instances, but in a name change, it depends upon what type of entity it is. Because do you have a DBA or do you have an LLC? Do you have a corporation, partnership, all of that stuff? So the entity that approved your name has to approve your name change first. So if you have a DBA, the county where you filed, if you have an LLC, for example, or a corporation, the Secretary of State, you change your name with the bank, and you also do a name change with the IRS. And usually, depending upon the form that you're using, it could be as easy as a check in the box that you are notifying them that there is a change of name so that going forward, they can expect the tax return with the same EIN number under the new name.
Okay, and she has an S corp, so the particular form she has to file with the state of California to change the name. She doesn't necessarily need to get an EIN.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
So Cherry wants to know, is the 1099-K only applicable to businesses, not for personal PayPal Venmo accounts?
Well, when you say personal, I'm assuming if you were to go out to have lunch or dinner with some friends and you're paying them via PayPal, in those cases, those are considered peer-to-peer transfers, and those are not. But if you have a PayPal for a business account, and you may accidentally or intentionally paying somebody through that PayPal business account or receiving money through that PayPal business account, then it will be subject to 1099-K. But peer-to-peer is not.
Right. Gail, you have a question about ERTC. I'm going to recommend that you make an appointment with one of our advisors to go over that. It's a complicated matter that requires the filing of particular forms, and there's all sorts of rules around it. We don't have the time at this session to go through ERTC.
And I'll say that I'm glad you bring that up, Mike, because going forward, it is going to be one of the hot issues for audit, because it's a lot of money that a lot of people have received, and basically so far it has worked on an honor system. But going forward, there could be audits just to make sure, hey, were you closed? Did you have a partial shutdown? Did you have the proper employees who were qualified? So it is something, you're right, we would want to have more going forward, to have more personalized discussion.
Right. All right. So somebody sent payments to a handyman via Zelle. Do I have responsibility with 1099? The handyman
Yes.
made repairs. We made repairs in a rental.
I'm sorry, repeat that one more time, please.
The handyman made repairs in a rental that was owned by this person.
So in this case, it's not a 1099-K. In this case, it will be a 1099 NEC that the business should have issued to the handyman or handy woman or handy person by January 31st. So if you haven't filed already the 1099 NEC, I would highly suggest you do so as soon as possible, because the penalty starts at $50 and then it goes up to $500. So the longer you delay, the more the penalties come up. So if you pay, and oftentimes my clients ask me that, what if I don't file? Well, IRS then can disallow a deduction, because the IRS doesn't know if the handy person, handy woman or man paid taxes on that income or not. So they will just say, hey, you didn't do the proper reporting, you didn't tell us, you didn't file the 1099 NEC, we're going to disallow this deduction.
Okay, somebody hasn't received their 1099 came from PayPal. What should this person do?
Contact PayPal.
Contact PayPal. Yeah.
I had some clients who did a lot of business on Shopify, like millions of dollars, and Shopify, for whatever reason, didn't issue them the 1099-K until August. So it happens, it happens. A lot of accounting companies, small and large, are still suffering from all the paperwork backlog. And as of December 24th, IRS still hasn't processed over 500,000 1040Xs. Forget the other stuff. So yes, delays happen. You have to wait, and you have to keep on imploring them to issue it to you. Go on extension, or if you already know how much money you received and there were no discrepancies for returns or allowances, then you can just use your own number. So actually, that's a good point you bring up, Mike. You don't have to wait for a 1099-K to do your taxes. I suggest, a lot of tax preparers suggest their clients to wait for it. So if there's any discrepancy, IRS will always believe that 1099-K over your assertion any given day. So it's a good practice, but you can file, if you already have an airtight accounting system, you can file your tax returns without waiting for a 1099-K, 1099 NECs, or 1099
You
miscellaneous.
can file an amended return if necessary.
Exactly,
People
it's
do.
necessary, file an amendment, yeah.
And by the way, I believe the IRS is still behind paper returns by millions for the
Yes.
following year.
Yes, indeed.
If you don't want the IRS to contact you, file a paper return. It might be a while before they get hold of it.
Yeah, Yeah.
Somebody said they heard banks will be sending people 1099s for Zelle payment. Well, I don't know if banks will be doing it. It'll be the people who are paying you that will be sending you 1099.
well, correct. So Zelle is a little different. So Zelle is still considered a peer-to-peer transfer. So this is where Venmo and PayPal allow you. This is why sometimes if you use Venmo, you may see, hey, if you're going to pay somebody, hey, are you paying somebody for a business transaction? Because then let's say if you send somebody $100, they will only receive $97.25, let's say, because the PayPal or Venmo will take a fee to do the 1099-K. But if you are just doing personal, there were some rumors early on last year that there could be confusion. As of right now, the understanding is, and again, I use the word understanding very loosely, just an understanding, that nobody wants to create more paperwork for the IRS. So if you are sending money to your house cleaner every single month, the same amount, and if you get audited, even though you're not saying that this is a business transaction, why are you paying this person? Because if you have somebody coming in at a regular schedule to clean your house, to babysit for your kids, and you're paying them through Zelle or Venmo, and you're not choosing the business option, if you get audited, they will say, well, did you pay the household employment taxes? So this is where you are subject to that. If you're hiring a cook or somebody and they come in, and the threshold is like only about $1,000 a year, right? So if you're paying somebody $150 a month, that's $1,800. And they're coming to your work or your home every month, every 2 weeks, you should have withheld Social Security, Medicare taxes. But in the absence of that, if you're just hanging out with friends and you're paying and you're splitting a check for drinks or food or a travel plan, nobody wants to create paperwork for that. So Zelle is still a peer-to-peer transfer, but if you're paying a handy person through Zelle, then the bank will not issue a 1099-K because they're assuming you're giving somebody a gift. Anybody can give anybody $16,000 a year, no questions asked. Well, no documents asked. But if you're paying somebody for any work through Zelle, you can pay by Zelle, but now you have the responsibility of issuing a 1099 NEC, which is non-employee compensation, or 1099 miscellaneous. Many of you who may be paying rent on an office space, to maybe you're sharing an office space, not a traditional WeWork or Regis, like you and somebody take on an office space and they're on the lease and you're paying them, you are supposed to issue them a 1099 miscellaneous for rent. Because if the rent is $3,000 a month and you're paying them $1,000 and they're paying $3,000, you don't know on their tax return if they're deducting $3,000 or $2,000. You're deducting $1,000 on your tax return for paying this person this $1,000 for sharing the rent on equipment, on real estate, or something else. For you to claim a deduction, you have to issue them a 1099 miscellaneous. Now, there are a few exceptions. For example, if you're paying them by credit card, you don't have to because the bank will issue them a 1099-K. If you're paying them, if you're paying their S Corp or C Corp, you are exempt. But if they're an LLC disregarded for tax purposes, or if they're an LLC taxed as a partnership for whatever business they're doing, you have to issue their business under their EIN a 1099 miscellaneous. And the deadline was January 31st. So you still can, for a small penalty, or you can also sometimes request penalty abatement. But the key is get it done, because if you pay somebody, I don't know, $2,000 a month for rent, that's $24,000 for the year. That can add up.
So Gail, your question is, you have to send a 1099 to persons who run their own business, whether they are DBA or incorporated. Well, it makes a difference. You don't have to send a 1099 to a corporation, unless it's a law firm, I believe.
Law or a medical practitioner.
Right.
Yes.
But if they're a sole proprietor, not incorporated, then yes,
Yeah.
you do have to send a 1099. Now, that's not if you're paying a medical expense for yourself. That's not what we're talking about.
No. You maybe have somebody coming in who's a doctor and doing a COVID test, for example, or whatever. IRS requires that if you're paying somebody in the medical practice or law, you have to issue them a 1099 no matter what. And with the lawyers, it depends on what type of work they're doing for you. Their type of work may require you to issue a 1099 NEC or 1099 miscellaneous other income. So this is where, even if you end up issuing a 1099, and now people ask, what's the difference? Well, the difference is whether the income is subject to self-employment taxes or not. So it makes a huge difference. So at the very least, even if you issue the wrong form, IRS may forgive you. But the thing is, it depends upon the context. If you paid a lawyer $25,000, forgiveness is less to come by versus if you paid them $1,000, because the threshold is $600.
Yeah.
IRS doesn't care, but as the numbers get bigger, the self-employment taxes get bigger. They do care, because the wrong form can make a difference of maybe $5,000 in self-employment taxes for them. They care about $5,000. They don't care about $25.
But let's be very clear. We're talking about business expenses spent for medical personnel or employees, not for your personal expenses.
Not for the personal, correct.
So Pete Smith is saying, double check the 1099K limit. He got a message from Square stating that the limit went back to $20,000.
I checked right before this thing and it still says 600. I checked the IRS website as of December 9th, 2022. So, and maybe it's going back to effective this year. So that, again, this is where things are still in flux and you never know. And this is where I will trust the IRS bulletin over Square, because like I said, Shopify had huge issues last year. So this is
always go to the source.
Yeah, they did change it because this was supposed to be effective last year. So they changed it last year for 2021 tax season. But you know what? I always believe in measuring twice, cutting once. I'll double check the bulletin. But
good point here. If you ever have a question about what the agency is doing, never rely on some outside source. Always go direct to the agency and ask the question to get the information. Many of you have heard there's going to be 87,000 IRS agents being hired under a bill. Yes, that's true. But they're replacing how many that have left the profession?
Yeah.
Over 100,000. So they're not adding staff.
Correct.
The IRS has been understaffed for decades.
Not to mention, last year, I had a client yelling at me over the phone for misinforming them because they called the IRS and they were told that their extension was only good until October 10th. And she was like, you told me October 15th and now I'm late. I'm like, no, I didn't. So I had to send them the IRS website to say, look, on their website. So even if you call them, again, people are people. People make mistakes. Chefs make mistakes, accountants, engineers, lawyers, they make mistakes. So always check the IRS bulletin for that information. But either way, now here's another thing. Even if they change their requirement, it doesn't mean that you don't have to report that on taxes. So let's say even if they go back, that a 1099K, we're talking about 1099K, not NEC, not miscellaneous. Let's say even if they go back to, okay, 200 transactions, $20,000. Does that mean that if you only had 100 transactions totaling $5,000, you're exempt somehow from reporting that taxable income? No, you still have to report it. Even if you make $100 as a 1099 NEC, you have to report that income. You should report that income. Now you can take deductions against it on your Schedule C and say, well, $100 cost me $200 to make, so I have a loss. That's fine, but you're still supposed to report it. So the 1099K issue is only a fact checking for the IRS. Because there are a lot of people who make $10,000, $15,000, $50,000, but they only had 185 transactions. They made $50,000 and never reported that income on their tax return because, hey, they never got a 1099K. If they ever get audited, guess what? Huge penalties, huge interest, because they underreported their taxable income by $50,000. Just because there is a 1099K not issued, for whatever reason, you're still on the hook. Just like if you don't issue a 1099 NEC, you cannot take the deduction. But let's say if the other person didn't report that taxable income, guess what? IRS will collect from both of you. They will still claim taxable income on the recipient to make sure they reported or not, because you didn't issue them a 1099 NEC, and they will still collect from you. So on the same $5,000 that you paid to a handy person, you took the deduction, but you didn't issue the 1099 NEC, IRS will disallow your deduction. Your taxable income goes up by $5,000. Thank you for the tax bill, the interest, and the penalties. Oh, and the person that you claim you took the deduction for, they didn't report it either because you never issued a 1099 NEC. They will collect from them also. So this is how people get in that downward spiral and make an opportunity for the IRS to collect on the same dollar twice. They win either way.
Right. Was there more to your presentation?
Yes. So couple of things that have gone away since last year. A lot of people for the last 2 or 3 years got accustomed to receiving a lot of money back or bigger refunds. IRS has been warning, and this is just a reminder, your tax bill may look very different than it did for tax year 2020 and 2021. Why? Because some of the things that are going away, when the pandemic hit, a lot of people, especially initially, were supporting a lot of charities to help those in need. So even if you didn't claim itemized deductions, you were allowed to take charitable contribution deduction on your 1040 directly in the absence of a Schedule A, which is itemized deduction. For 2022, that is no longer valid. So even if you made charitable contributions in 2022, you don't itemize deduct, you take the standard deduction, you can no longer take that deduction. So keep that in mind. Also, a gentle reminder, if you ever support any campaign on GoFundMe, most of those do not qualify for charitable contributions because they are considered a gift to a person in need, unless the organization that is organizing that charitable event is a 501c3, then your contributions on GoFundMe are deductible. Otherwise, 8 out of 10 times, most of these GoFundMe and other platform projects are run by individuals for a family member or a friend in need. They're not deductible. So you donate $100, $1,000 or $10,000, whatever it may be, cannot deduct them, because for you to deduct them, it has to be taxable income for someone. 501c3s are exempt from taxable income. That is why you are able to deduct. So keep that in mind. Also, for tax year 2022, the dependent tax credit is going down, and so is the child tax credit, and so is the earned income tax credit. So these credits were inflated almost double during tax year 2020, 2021. So a lot of people who were accustomed to making a certain amount of money saw their tax bill dramatically drop. But this year, it may go back up depending upon your each individual tax situation. Also, I will do a presentation on this topic separately, but it's been coming up a lot, the tax credit for electric vehicles. That is $7,500, depending upon when you take delivery of the vehicle. If you took the delivery of the vehicle between August 17th of last year up until December 31st, you may have a different qualification factor for this $7,500 tax credit. Versus if you took delivery on January 1st, 2023 or later, there's a different qualification. So you may still qualify, but which vehicle qualifies and what taxable income and what is the battery capacity, it is a little different because there are provisions that, for example, Teslas, many of their models do not qualify because they've already oversold that model category. So the newer companies in the field are more acceptable for this tax credit. So when you took the delivery and what is your income and which vehicle you got, it can make a difference. So the reason that I'm bringing it up right now as a precursor, because a lot of people say, hey, my friend got a credit, so should I. It doesn't work that way, depending on these different factors. And if you took delivery before August 16th, on or before August 16th, you may not qualify for it. So somebody buying the car within 2022 tax year may have a very different, and also whether the purchaser is a business versus an individual. So that's another thing that comes up commonly. Should I buy this vehicle under my business name or my name? That can have a big impact on the tax credit and the deductibility. So let's see, anything else I wanted to bring up? No, I think these were the only changes. We are at 1:38. I have 7 more minutes. I'm happy to entertain any other questions.
While we're waiting for questions, let me just share this screen. Perhaps you can talk to it. So for those of you who are confused, we have different forms to different entities. All right. So what sometimes happens, you probably seen it GB, somebody files the wrong form. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Right. This especially gets confusing when you have an LLC and you elect to be taxed as a subchapter S corporation.
Correct.
You want to go through this? Yeah,
yes, actually, especially for example, I see this happen a lot, even with some tax preparers. An LLC doesn't exist in the tax world. You have to tell the IRS how you want to be taxed. If you have a partnership, you've typically filed 1065 as you see it right there. But if you have a single member LLC, so if a single member LLC is a sole prop, but for California purposes, they're still expecting Form 568. So the most common issue that I see is somebody electing to have their LLC taxed as a partnership. So for IRS purposes, they're going to file 1065. Well, the California version of the 1065 is 565. So if they're doing TurboTax or if they're a tax preparer who's not paying close attention, they may end up filing 565 for their LLC with California. That's a big no-no. It's as if you never filed a tax return. So they will send you notices that, hey, you never filed a tax return. An LLC is supposed to file 568. If you have a general partnership, then you may file 565. So be very careful. If you have 1120, so let's say a C Corp, you're going to file the 100, 1120S, which is an S Corp, you're going to file 100S. But the partnership is where a lot of tax preparers and TurboTax trips up if you don't answer the right question within the tax software. Does that make sense, Mike?
Yes. So we know this is confusing for a lot of people. We get that.
Correct.
Yes. And I should have put 568. So if you have an LLC that has not elected subchapter S tax treatment, yes, for the IRS, you file Schedule C. But for the state of California, you file Form 568.
Correct.
But if you have elected subchapter S tax treatment, it's the forms listed as well, 1120S
Correct.
and 100S.
Correct.
File the right form. That's the lesson.
Yes.
Okay.
On the right form.
And then the K1s will be automatically generated.
Correct.
Take the K1s and it applies to your personal tax returns.
And that's another common mistake I see because there are different types of K1s. There are K1S for an S Corp, K1P for partnership, K1F for a fiduciary. Let's say if you have a 1041 that you're filing for an estate tax. So if you're doing self-preparation, make sure you choose a correct K1 designation.
Right.
I have one client I just took on, and his partnership issued a wrong form. He reported the income incorrectly and ended up paying an additional $30,000 in taxes just because it checked the wrong form
Box.
in TurboTax, and this was just last year. So it happens. Intelligent people using the software, trusting the AI. The AI is great. I'm not putting it down, but you still want to have your human intelligence trump the AI for now.
Right.
I think even like Google's AI made a huge blunder. They were just talking about it because in response to Chat GPT, Google released Bard, and there are some huge issues with that already too.
Right. Somebody wants to know if the filing deadline for California disaster county has been extended. Do you know anything about that?
So there are, yeah, so if you are in a certain disaster zone as declared by the governor, yeah, so there are different tax deadlines for you. And that's something that you may want to work with your preparer, or if you're doing a self-preparation, you may have more time because unfortunately your life is turned upside down and tax filing is not the highest priority for you. Many people have also lost a lot of records in those disasters, so they are given extra time.
Somebody wants to know what's the best tax year for 1065 so I'm assuming you have partnerships.
I'm sorry.
So I don't know if you want to answer what's the best tax software that's also tax software out there.
You know, it depends on the user. Each software has its own pros and cons. I'm a tax professional. We have many tax softwares. We're switching to one right now, and it's like, what is better, BMW or Mercedes? It depends on the user. My dad, you couldn't pay him to drive a BMW. He just didn't like BMW. There's nothing wrong with them. So it's there's tax act, there's TurboTax, there's tax, many different things. Use them, use different ones. And if something works, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. The main thing, the main mistakes that happen typically are with the user. It's not necessarily always a tax software.
You have to get the right version of the tax software because
Correct.
tax cut and these other federal tax have different versions depending upon what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, read the reviews, talk to people, ask.
Right. Correct.
So you're coming up to the end here. We're going to end it here. BB has to move on to another appointment. We'll be back next week.
Yes.
Somebody asked about insurance. I can talk about that unless you have another topic in mind.
Yeah, we can do insurance next week, and then the following week we can do the electric car tax credit.
All right, let's do that.
Perfect.
All right, we're going to wish everybody a good day and a good week, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Thank you so much. Thanks, Lauren.
Take care.
Bye now.